we started transporting. I was driving. I got maybe, a few miles into the transport, and to me, it was pretty obvious to me that I didn't feel right driving.
Stay tuned. Coming up in this episode, it's part 2 of my 2-part interview with 3 members of the Mukilteo Fire Department who were overcome by carbon monoxide on an EMS call. But first, let's hear from our amazing sponsor, Midwest Fire. Every day, the hard-working men and women at Midwest Fire build the most reliable firefighting apparatus to be found anywhere. Their customers know a well-built fire engine means lives and property saved. Midwest Fire, a factory direct manufacturer dedicated to helping you extinguish fire before it becomes a raging beast. To learn more about what fuels their passion, visit MidwestFire.com. Hello, and welcome to episode 309 of the Situation Awareness Matters show. I'm your host, Rich Gassaway. The purpose of this program is to help improve situational awareness and high-risk decision-making for individuals and teams who work in high-stress, high-consequence, time-compressed environments with changing conditions. The SAMatters mission is simple. We want to help you and the members of your team see the bad things coming in time to prevent bad outcomes. I'm coming to you today from my office in St. Paul, Minnesota, having just returned from delivering, 9 programs over the past 7 days. For the Bloomfield, New Jersey Fire Department, I did 4 live virtual over the internet events. For the Atascocita Fire Department, I did 3 live programs over 2 days. For the Champions Emergency Services District, also in Texas, a live program. And then I went to Delaware City to do a program for the Delaware City Refining Company. I'm thankful for all the program hosts, and especially thankful to be asked to help improve situational awareness at industrial and manufacturing facilities like Delaware City Refinery. In fact, helping to improve the safety of industrial manufacturing workers was the focus of my new book right here. How Smart Workers Use Situational Awareness to Improve Safety. Today's feature segment is sponsored by the Situational Awareness Matters Online Academy. The Online Academy trains and certifies your members on situational awareness skills essential for improving high-risk decision-making outcomes. Visit SAMatters.com, click on the Online Academy tab under the Training section at the top of the homepage if you want to learn more. All right, let's jump into today's feature segment, part 2 of my interview with Battalion Chief Troy Elmore, Firefighter Acting Captain Brian Oullette, and Firefighter EMT Jason Shuck, as they share their powerful story and lessons learned from being victims of carbon monoxide poisoning while operating on the scene of an EMS call.
We all kind of looked at each other and, said, I maybe feel something, but I feel okay, again, thinking it's 4 a.m. Are we just groggy? Are we just groggy? So I did, we started transporting. I was driving. I got maybe, a few miles into the transport, and to me, it was pretty obvious to me that I didn't feel right driving. So I notified my captain, who was in the back with Brian, and said, I can't drive. I definitely felt off. And so we requested that another medic unit that was kind of meet us en route to the hospital. So
you get another engine company from Everett.
We requested another engine and medic unit, I think, but we got a medic unit, or no, it was an engine that met us not too far into the transport, and then they one of their crew hopped into our medic unit and drove us to the hospital.
Yeah. And that was a BLS engine, so they didn't have a medic to take over either. And again, we still hadn't had the confirmation quite yet that it was CO, and felt like we were still good enough to keep with the patient care.
Yeah.
Again, yeah.
Okay. I have another comment coming in from Facebook Live from Larry Granberg. He said, on our department up in Stacy, Minnesota, we have a CO monitor attached to the clipboard that gets turned on before we go into a residence for medical calls. Did you guys have any kind of monitoring equipment with you on the unit?
We did not have those, but we had them the very next day.
Okay.
I think they got bought.
Surprisingly, we got those the next day.
Yeah, it's amazing how things like that can happen. And to talk about the prevalence of this, this interview with you guys is maybe the third interview that I've done with responders who've been on reported something else that was actually CO, and they didn't have the monitors, but now they do. So what you're describing is perfectly aligned to what I'm seeing. So, we're not quite to the lessons learned yet, but when we get to the lessons learned, one of them would be probably to have a CO monitor, as you guys do now. So back to the so you got an engine that shows up to where you guys are now parked on a roadside or in a parking lot somewhere, and play out for me how that all continues to work out.
Basically, yeah, it was just an engine crew that showed up, and they asked, what do we need? Driver.
So we need a driver.
Yeah.
So we suspected that we may have a carbon monoxide issue, and that at this point we suspect we may have been exposed.
Yeah.
We need it. We need you to, we got a sick patient.
Yeah.
As well, and we need a driver to get us to the hospital.
Yeah, drive us lights and get us there. And also at that point, I'd been in contact with the ER. I made my patient report, my short report, and advised that we suspected CO and that we've been exposed, but I didn't mention yet that, there's 3 patients. I was just speaking of this one. And as soon as we got on the road again, I believe after the other engine company started driving us, that's when the battalion chief that took command at the apartment complex got on the radio and told us that the CO was 500 or whatever it was, parts per million. And so now we had our confirmation, and I contacted the ER again en route and said that it is confirmed CO exposure, and you have 3 patients most likely feeling the effects with three more, I guess, patients.
Actually, then our second medic unit that showed up was transporting the girlfriend at that point as well.
Yeah.
Is everybody going to the same hospital?
Yes.
Okay. And then Brian, did you at any point that you can recollect, after you found out that you were exposed to 500 parts per million, have any concern about your faculties to be able to continue to adequately care for your patient, knowing now what you had been exposed to, or were you just close enough to the hospital that it didn't factor for you?
I mean, we were close enough to the hospital, and the care at that point was, simple. And the guy, I'll move on to after the guy got the oxygen, but to answer your question, I mean, it crossed my mind, but I felt like, I still felt like I was in the call. I don't know if that makes sense, but sick people, you get, that, not rush, but you get that adrenaline, and I was focused on the call. I didn't truly feel, I felt off, but I didn't feel like I was off enough that it was affecting my patient care.
Mhm.
You know,
Were you thinking that Brian was a patient at that point? Or I'm sorry, Jason was a patient at that point?
I'd mentioned to the hospital that you had three, the crew and the patient. I knew that we were turning into patients, but I didn't feel like it yet. And that could have been obviously the hypoxia. You just don't feel like it at the time. But looking back, would I have changed my patient care? Would it change anything? I think it would have. It's a simple. It's simple just to give oxygen, but we should have been on the oxygen too, if that makes sense. I mean, but no, it had crossed my mind. I'm the patient. I'm a patient too. Jason's a patient. Steve's a patient. We're all sitting there looking at each other. It's like, are you actually feeling this? Do you feel like you're feeling it? But again, I think the rush of the call, the adrenaline of the call, I felt like I was still within my wits to make the right decision for the patient.
I think too at that point, we were minutes from the hospital.
Yeah.
So, but it would
we
have
were.
taken longer to get another crew to come and respond
Yeah.
further, than it would have for us to just, get to the hospital. We already had a driver that was uninvolved with taking with us on the way. So
By the time you guys get to the hospital, are the three of you, well, I guess we could throw your patient in as well. Are you doing better, worse, or about the same by the time you reach the ER?
I think all three of us were about the same.
Yeah, about the same. I mean,
But-
I felt, I guess, foggy,
Yeah.
a little bit, but still able to kind of,
Yeah.
we still got the patient inside,
Yeah.
transferred care, gave a short report and all that.
What was interesting to me is that I did multiple 12 leads en route throughout with his oxygen, care that we were giving him. We were giving high flow, continuous O2, and by the time we got there, the ischemic changes that I was mentioning, those had improved. He did not have any more ischemia. His heart rate had slowed, and he was actually starting to talk to us. He was turning around with the oxygen, care, which was very interesting to me. But yeah, he was improving. And
yeah.
by the time we got him dropped off and we got our own rooms, he was talking full sentences to the doctor.
And when you got to the ER, did the ER staff immediately intake the three of you as patients, or was it after you did like your patient handoff and that somebody said, we should probably check you guys out, or were you like full on patients right from the get-go of your
patient handoff, and then they basically corralled us into another
Yeah,
room and said,
we were patients.
they told us we were patients.
Yeah, we were patients when we showed up, and that doctor that I handed off the patient to, he was full on. You guys are patients now. He did stop me because, to me, the full effects. Once we got to the hospital, that's when I stood up. That's when I kind of felt personally. I felt the effects, and when I was handing off the patient, giving my report, the doctor ended up just saying, "You know what? I got it. Go to your room and get some oxygen." So
the symptoms were significant enough that none of the three of you were kind of in the typical firefighter denial mode. I'm fine. You all three knew you weren't fine.
I think we all, again, kind of looked at each other and just, I remember us saying like, yeah, maybe I feel off,
Yeah.
and we all kind of said that, but I'd say, yeah, there was probably some denial in there too. Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So what did your, when you were at the hospital, what was your, how did they complete their assessment, and what kind of treatment did you go through as a result of this?
They did the blood draw.
yeah, the ABGs, the art gases. They did a CO art gas on us initially, and we weren't at the levels of needing the hyperbaric chamber.
Yeah, we
which
were
is
all
good.
in the mid to high teens.
What about your patient?
Patients were in the high 20s, I
20s or
believe.
30s, I believe.
High 20s, low 30s.
Yeah.
Did they get
Ish, but
chambered?
they
Oh,
got
yeah.
they got sent to the hyperbaric.
They got
chamber.
transported down to Seattle where they got the hyperbaric chamber.
All right.
And we ended up being sitting for 3-4 hours on high flow oxygen.
Yeah. We had to watch 9/11 stuff on TV while we were sitting on oxygen.
Lots of
And-
looking at us taking pictures.
Yes. A lot of nurses, a lot of fire crews stopping by, saying hi, how you doing? Here, picture. Bye.
So the call happened at 4 a.m. So by the time all of this wrapped up, you guys were either off duty or close to being off duty. Yes.
Yeah, I think we left the hospital sometime around probably it was
9,
after
10.
9-10 o'clock.
Yeah.
All right. And Troy, were you the battalion chief on the call?
I was not the battalion chief. I was actually off duty that day. And so one of the captains was acting battalion chief. And so he's the one that kind of wrangled everything, and I learned about it after the fact. I just wound up in charge of the investigation portion of things.
Okay. And from the perspective of being the department's safety officer, how did you go about investigating this or determining opportunities to do things differently as a result of this? What did your role in this look like?
So the actual measure of getting in carbon monoxide detectors put on the kits was done by the following battalion chief on the next shift. So by the time I got to work, they'd already found the remedy for future situations. My goal was basically to collect all the information or the facts at hand and talk to these guys, just get, kind of witness statements. And then I went out to the complex itself and took pictures of the utility room where it was determined by the gas company that the carbon monoxide emissions were coming from. And so I pretty much just dealt with things on that end, taking pictures and just trying to figure out what happened. And at the end of the day, it was just pretty self-explanatory once you got in there and took a look around.
Yeah. Now I'm going to ask a question that the question is not a question of judgment, but I'm inquisitive to understand some aspect of this. So, and each of you can answer from your own point of view. Prior to this event, were any of the three of you aware of other incidents in the fire service where firefighters had been impacted by CO on medical calls? Or was this something that just you had no previous knowledge to?
On medical calls, yeah, I mean, I've heard of really minor incidents, where it was the source was either found really quickly and they moved out, or it just became very, pretty obvious that was the issue. Whereas I think, again, on this particular call, we didn't have, given the location, the type of, we were in a fitness center, the situation, the events leading up to the incident, the fact that, we had one patient where, and, in addition, the girlfriend was inside and not displaying any symptoms. Just, there was nothing, I think, in my mind, in the heat of the moment of the call that really led us to believe it was carbon monoxide, with the exception of what we thought were false readings on the life pack. But until, we were there for 15 minutes or so and kind of started to feel the effects. Again, the girlfriend, started displaying symptoms. It was 15-20 minutes into the call where we were already exposed, that all of those things kind of
Transpired.
Like, oh, something else is going on here. So,
Brian, had you known about previous incidents of firefighters being overcome by CO?
I mean, I've heard of yes, I've heard of them. The near miss reports. I remember in like medic school where every scenario is the worst case scenario, and you have a MCI of people down for unknown cause, that sort of thing. You need to think about it, but I think Jason hit it right on the head. It's it was difficult to, I mean, honestly, I didn't know that there was any sources of CO in that, gym at the time. So yeah, it just didn't, with one patient, the girlfriend sitting there talking to us, and, it never really crossed my mind until it kind of, everything started to converge together. Once we had a second patient, we were feeling a little off and had a good chance to sit and look at the monitor and look at the flashing and realize that, the false number that we get isn't the same number. It's a higher number that I'd never seen before. That's what really, cued us in, or cued me in. Then hearing the patient go down, or the second patient, I mean, that all cued us into, hey, this is environmental. This is something going on, something else going on. But I had heard of incidents in the past.
It certainly presents as two inconsistent clues or indicators to have one symptomatic patient and one non-symptomatic patient, both in the same physical environment. Even historically, as I have interviewed people, there have been a few where there was only ever one person in the environment, but when those ones where they've had multiple people in the environment, everyone was affected, so that they had this kind of a similar presentation of multiple people giving them the indication that, that there was something environmentally wrong. I could certainly see how environmental factor didn't queue up for you when you have two people in the same environment, one symptomatic and one not. It certainly seems to be some medical problem pertinent to that individual and not from an environmental point of view.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously we'll call him the original patient, had been in there much longer. So obviously,
and he'd been running, so he'd been breathing. He was tachypnic, breathing it in quicker and getting more exposed to it a lot quicker with his sweatsuit on at 4 a.m. Not sure why anybody wants to work out that early, but
prior to this incident, had there ever, that you can recall, ever been any discussion in the department about getting either CO or like 4-gas monitors on the med unit? Had that ever been brought up for discussion, or was just something that just wasn't on the radar?
That's a battalion chief question.
The neighboring department to the south of us, very progressive, very safety oriented. We had noticed, I don't know, probably a year before, something like that, they had started carrying CO detectors with their medical equipment. And it had been a conversation kind of out in the field, and I know it had made its way into the, I was actually in the training and safety office at the time, and then took a break and just had come back when this occurred. So it was one of those things that we were aware of. We had heard that it had gone off for them on a call before, but not actually heard that anybody had a significant exposure, had to be transported or anything of that nature. And we always know those horror stories are out there, but every kind of call has one of those. So yeah, we were aware of it, but it just didn't kind of raise to that level of, we got to get on this. So.
Okay. So what are some of your lessons learned and takeaways from this event that you would want others to know about?
I mean, the obvious is, the little portable monitor that we have hooked to our med kits, if we had that, I think this would have been a way different outcome.
Yeah.
I mean, those things are, I don't know how much they cost, but
$100.
So obviously relatively inexpensive. I think they're good. They have a shelf life of, 2 years. They definitely work. I've started another vehicle next to them, and it goes off just from the exhaust of the vehicle. So yeah, that probably could have, changed how this call went off, right off the bat. So that's probably the biggest thing. The other,
I think listening to yourself too, listening to that, we were sitting there questioning, do we feel it? Is this 4 o'clock in the morning type of deal? Listening to yourself in that sense. But again, I think that when it all started going down, we all kind of chimed in at the same time. We all, Jason and I in the back of the medic unit, we, taking our how we were feeling, plus what we were seeing on the monitor, and then looking at the presentation of the patient, is like it all made sense. And as soon as, you know, that light went off in our head, it, you know, the second patient came along, and then, you know, it all just kind of came, it worked out, I think, as quickly as possible without having, you know, any monitoring devices on. So lesson learned, I'll listen to my, you know, the presentation, I'll have my situational awareness up a little bit more with the way the person was presenting. But again, this just seemed like a run of the mill, you know, just a peculiar call. But that's going to be back in the back of my mind now.
I mean, you know, the other thing too is, you know, how many people have actually really, you know, first responders have really been exposed to carbon monoxide and know what it feels like when you've been exposed to it, right? I mean, I certainly hadn't, you know, not that I'm recommending going and, you know, sucking on a tailpipe to see what it feels like, but, you know, look, I mean, I know what it feels like now, right?
Yeah.
You know, so if I'm ever in that situation again, and then I think, you know,
Take a moment, Jason, for those who might not have captured it when you said it, take a moment to describe for them what that might feel like. So if they're feeling it, they might say, hey, this might, you know, I heard a dude talk about this, and this is kind of how I'm feeling right now.
Yeah. So, I mean, a couple different ways I think I would describe it. You know, it is that kind of foggy haze, you know, at 4 a.m. And that's kind of, again, what was kind of confusing us. But I think as the symptoms progressed, again, it kind of to me felt like that feeling when if you've been to the dentist office and they put you on nitrous oxide, you just kind of have that weird feeling in your head. I also, you know, again, looking back, I remember at one point I was trying, you know, I had pulled out the 12 leads and put on this guy and you know, and do a 12 lead on the patient. And I remember just kind of like looking at the different wires, and I knew, I mean, you know, however many times I've, you know, put those leads on a patient, no big deal. But I remember just kind of looking at them and like I knew what I needed to do, but it just formulating that action or that thought just kind of seemed a little slower.
That's what our captain kind of described it as too. He's sitting there, you know, he's thinking of one thing, but getting the motion, getting the, you know, just, he felt like he was slow. His reaction time was slow. Like he was thinking of, you know, picking something up, and then he went and did something else, or for, you know, it took a while for the mind and body to react to what he wanted to do. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Let me throw another question in from the Facebook live feed. Again, from Rory Boone, says, are there any local code requirements there for CO detectors in multifamily occupancies?
I think in the rooms.
In the residences, and don't quote me, but my understanding was, again, this is in a fitness center, for an apartment complex,
and it's a separate building.
My understanding was that there is no requirement in that particular building for the, you know, the complex to have them in there. That being said, I do believe our fire marshal has gone around, you know, to apartment complexes and kindly asked them to voluntarily put those in and letting them know, you know, kind of that there was this situation. And I think there's been a pretty positive response from that, getting those put in, you know, around the complexes in our area, you know, even though they are not technically required.
Mm-hmm.
And so residential, yes. Multifamily, it is not a requirement.
Okay. Troy, from your perspective of being a safety officer, what other lessons or takeaways might you share with the audience, you know, from your involvement in this?
So certainly the situational awareness aspect of things, you know, there was some discussion about which officer, the acting officer or the captain, was the one that realized it might have been a multiple patient exposure involving, you know, CO. But the fact that somebody on scene at 4 a.m. with an unusual presentation just the mere fact a second a patient appeared, that is immediately where that individual went. And I think when you recognize the anomaly or that extra component that just makes the parts click into place, a lot of people tend to want to downplay it, or to, you know what I mean, to not, but this individual's like, no, this is how we need to look at this, and relay that information to command as fast as they could get it to them. Unfortunately, our first transport unit, these guys had already taken off from the scene about a minute and a half prior. So now we have our driver operator who's got a CO exposure, probably isn't mentating the best. So it was just unfortunate timing when the pieces fell into place and it was realized. So I'd say the other thing is, if this occurs on the scene with anybody else in the country, everybody's a patient at that point, and they should be remaining on scene. Even if they say they feel fine, if you have a report of somebody in that crew being symptomatic similar to what a patient's got in a short exposure period, I think everybody at that point, for safety's sake, needs to be treated as a patient and, you know, get additional resources there for the transport. The BC the following day, I mean, spot on with getting those CO detectors, really inexpensive, and just the right thing to do. But, you know, overall, just situational awareness, knowing what's going on and reacting to it. Don't downplay it.
Yeah. I want to give some credit out to Jason for, you might not think the way that I look at things, Jason, but here's how I look at things. It took a tremendous amount of courage for you to stop that med unit and declare yourself a patient, instead of trying to stay committed to your role and your task of getting the civilian patient to the hospital. And I don't want to miss the observation that there are a lot of responders out there who would not feel comfortable raising the flag in the moment and say, I'm a patient. You see it happen a lot on fire scenes. They get hurt, they get burned. They're like, oh, I'm fine, you know, just let me get a bottle change and I'll go back in. And they're in like total denial. And here you were with a mental deficit, CO instigated, and had the wherewithal, and what I would say the courage to stop that med unit and say, I declare myself to be a patient and no longer in a position to safely do my job. And we would be missing a really important lesson of this whole interview if we didn't pause and give acknowledgement to that.
Well, you know, thanks. I mean, I will say, I mean, there was the question in my mind, and it wasn't just me. I mean, our captain was, we were all kind of in communication with each other, trying to, you know, still at this point, like asking each other how we felt. And he did, you know, he asked, and it was kind of going through my head as I kind of got up to more like it happened when I got that feeling I couldn't drive. It was more on like a highway or a freeway, and trying to drive at that speed. I don't know. I didn't feel right. And he asked me, do you feel okay? And that's when I said, no, I don't. So thank you. Not, I can't take all the credit for it.
Yeah, well, it takes a lot, you know, even, you know, if your captain, if he was involved in the decision of calling other resources in and discontinuing your transport to the hospital, I extend the credit to everyone who was involved in that decision. But that's a decision that takes a lot of courage to declare yourself a patient in the middle of a call where you're taking care of a patient. It so frequently does not happen that way.
Well, and that was kind of I think, the internal, battle was like, we have a really sick patient that he really needs to get to the hospital. Do we delay getting into the hospital by declaring all of us patients and waiting, or, that was, I think, kind of, one of those spur of the moment decisions that,
Yeah. But I think a lot of people would default to putting the patient above themselves and just try to push on through to that, which could have then even had a greater tragic result, because you were impaired. It could have resulted in an accident, adding to the insult of the already existing situation. Let me ask you guys, as we wrap up, is there anything that the three of you would want to contribute to this discussion that you haven't been able to say because I haven't asked the right question to you?
And the only thing I was going to add is that this could have been worse. I mean, worse in a sense that had the girlfriend not called 911 and they found cardiac arrest, if this patient had gone into cardiac arrest, which I'm pretty sure he was minutes away from going into, just with the changes on the EKG and all that, I think he was working his way to cardiac arrest pretty quickly. Is that, if it wasn't for the girlfriend calling 911, we wouldn't have gotten there and just been exposed. We would have been working a code in an environment that, basically, the codes it's a stay and play type of deal. We're working in a large area, so gym, so we got plenty of room. We're going to be working them in there. We're going to be working hard. We're doing compressions, that sort of thing. Had he been in cardiac arrest, not only would have been, 6 people, from the 2 medic units, we would have gotten an engine company, a battalion chief, and probably another engine company to come do compressions and all that. So there would have been a lot more exposures. And so the girlfriend calling 911 was a big deal. And had the patient walked out saying, hey, I don't feel right, and walked out, there would have been the possibility of more exposures to the people at the apartment complex. So it kind of worked out. You got this, they found that there was an issue in the gym. Mm-hmm. And luckily everybody was able to, walk away from this with just an exposure. It could have been worse either way.
Ironically, you would use that example because in one of my previous near miss interviews on this show, I interviewed somebody that was on a response to a double unresponsive in a hotel room. And what happened was housekeeping went in, knocked on the door to clean the room, went in. There are 2 elderly people, unresponsive. The EMS responds, they go in, they've got a dual codes. They're working 2 codes. They don't know why, if it's like a suicide pact, or they're looking for meds or trying to figure it out, and they're working these dual codes in this hotel room. And what contributed to it was CO, which then turned the EMS crew into significant patients, turned the police that were on the scene into significant patients because of their lengthy exposure, because they're working these codes during this really high CO incidents. And what it was tracked back to was a pool heater in a storage room or a maintenance closet adjacent to this room had malfunctioned and filled this room with carbon monoxide. So, the very scenario that you're saying this could have turned into was one of the scenarios of a near miss interview that I had done a few years ago here. The circumstances were so eerily close to the 2, except that theirs were a code when they got on the scene. And what you're saying, this could have been, is exactly what theirs turned into. And they didn't have monitors either. And eventually then an engine company came to assist them with manpower for the codes. And somebody had a monitor on the engine, and they went in and the thing just went, the monitor went crazy.
And that could have, that in all senses could have happened too. Some of the responding units would have had if it would have been a code, the if game, if it would have been a code, they may have shown up and had a monitor on them, and it would have, but by that time, if we got enough people there working, we would have been, so.
But
Yeah.
I mean, not to simplify, but I think that is the the simplest, and it is a simple solution, right?
Yeah.
A little portable monitor on, attached to whatever kit you bring in is going to immediately alert you to that. Whereas that's not typically, unless you're dispatched to a carbon monoxide call specifically for that, that's not your first thought, right? I mean, unless you have, multiple, it's just one patient, like in our situation, there wasn't a lot really initially to key us into that.
Yeah.
So
Now this monitor that you have, does it clip onto a bag or onto a clipboard or onto the individual? How's it carried?
it's clipped on to our medical kit. I mean, it can, it could clip on to just about anything, but
Basically, any call we go on, we'll bring in this certain kit, BLS, lift assist, that sort of thing, ALS calls, whatever. We'll bring this kit in, and it's hooked to it. So
Do you have to turn the monitor on, or is it always on?
always on.
Mhm.
And like it has, I believe its shelf life or battery, whatever it is, it's 24 months.
Okay.
And what is it, $100? So
Yeah, that's a
relatively inexpensive.
pretty low-end solution to a potentially
Yeah.
massive problem.
You don't have to calibrate it. You don't have to charge it. It's always on, always running.
Wow. All right. Anything else that any of you would want to say that I didn't give you the chance to say before we close out?
I'd say that anybody that has the ability to bring this to their department and to draw attention to it, I think it happens more often than people think, and because there haven't been real serious consequences yet, it hasn't become kind of a national issue. But if you have influence at the regional level, your county level, or at the state level, and you can be proactive and maybe work on getting some rules in place through your training and safety officers and or through state legislature, I think it's well worthwhile. I mean, this is something that's it's been getting firefighters into trouble. We think we've been fortunate so far, and if we know about it, we probably should be addressing it.
Good advice. Good advice. Well, Jason, Brian, Chief Elmore, thank you for gifting me with some time to come on and to share this story. I know you did a near miss report, and that's one way of sharing. This way of sharing allows people to hear firsthand from the voices of the people who were involved, and give you a platform to say some things that maybe wouldn't be in the written form of the report, that somebody can actually learn from. They can share out with others. They can have some conversations in their department. I am sure, with all my heart, I'm sure there are departments that are going to see this show when it airs, and that day they're going to get CO monitors on their med bags. I have no doubt about it. Thank you so much. Thank you to Battalion Chief Troy Elmore, Firefighter Acting Captain Brian Oullette, and Firefighter EMT Jason Shuck for sharing the details of your incident and your lessons learned. Remember that this is part 2 of the interview, so if you missed last week's episode, you're going to want to go back and give that a listen to help provide context for today's lessons learned. In case you weren't aware, this show was launched back in 2014 with a purpose: to give a platform to those who've had near-miss events to share their lessons learned. When I'm on the road delivering situational awareness programs, attendees share amazing near-miss stories. Their stories motivated me to launch this show, so their lessons learned could be shared with a bigger audience. You. The Situational Awareness Matters show, podcasted as SAMatters Radio, and our companion video program, SAMatters TV on YouTube, along with other videos we have posted there, have enjoyed more than 1 million views, listens, and downloads. I'm so honored to provide this free platform for these incredible lessons to be shared. If you like the show, do me a solid favor and subscribe. For the audio version of the show, search and subscribe to SAMatters Radio on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, or iHeartRadio. For the video version of the show, subscribe to SAMatters TV on YouTube. Since 2007, our instructional team and consultants have helped more than 1,300 organizations and have trained over 86,000 individuals on improving high-risk decision-making, including fire, police, EMS, industry, military, business, medical, utility, transportation, aviation, energy production, biotechnology, and more. If someone you know works in a high-risk, high-consequence decision-making environment, then we are here to help improve their safety and to help them accomplish the most important mission of all. And that's to go home whole and healthy every day to the ones who love them. I'd like to take this moment to honor and thank some of our recent program and consulting clients. ExxonMobil's Global Response Team in Houston, Texas. Bloomfield Fire Department in Bloomfield, New Jersey. The Atascocita Fire Department in Atascocita, Texas. The Champions Emergency Services District in Houston, Texas. And the Delaware City Refining Company in Delaware. If you're interested in attending a program, here's where we're going to be upcoming. February 26th and 27th at the Firehouse World Conference in Las Vegas, Nevada. March 5 at the Center for Public Safety Excellence Conference in Orlando, Florida. March 10th at the Maryland Fire and Rescue Institute's National Fire Service Staff and Command Program in Annapolis, Maryland. March 14th at the Eastern Oregon EMS Conference in Pendleton, Oregon. March 16 and 17 at the Kitsap County Fire Training Officers Association Conference in Washington. March 23 at the Spring Fire Department in Spring, Texas. March 24 back to ExxonMobil, this time to present at their corporate school on the campus of Texas A&M University in College Station, Texas. Then we turn right around and go back to Spring on March 25 for another program for the Spring Fire Department. If you want to see the locations of all the upcoming events, just head over to our website, SAMatters.com. Click on the red tab labeled Upcoming Events Schedule. The tab's about halfway down the homepage, so just scroll down till you see the upcoming events red tab and just click on that. If you're interested in talking with me about conducting situational awareness assessment for your company or hosting a training program, then just click on the Contact Us tab on the top of the homepage and I'll give you a call. Remember to also check the show notes for how to subscribe to our free newsletter and how to follow us on social media. There, we're sharing ideas about how to improve situational awareness, how to make better decisions under stress, and how to improve the skills of critical thinking and resilient problem solving. Well, that's it. Episode 309 of the Situational Awareness Matters show is complete. Thank you again to my guests, Battalion Chief Troy Elmore, Firefighter Acting Captain Brian Oullette, and Firefighter EMT Jason Shuck. Thank you to our platinum sponsor, Midwest Fire. Thank you to our feature segment sponsor, the Situational Awareness Matters Online Academy. And thank you to our associate sponsor, Chief Miller. And most importantly, thank you, the listeners and viewers of this show, for sharing some of your valuable time with me today. I really appreciate your support of the SAMatters mission. Be safe out there, and may the peace of the Lord and strong situational awareness be with you always.
You've been listening to the Situational Awareness Matters radio show with Dr. Richard B. Gassaway. If you are interested in learning more about situational awareness, human factors, and decision-making under stress, visit SAMatters.com. If you are interested in booking Dr. Gassaway for an upcoming event, visit his personal website at richgassaway.com.